This is your week 3 meeting of season 3. So we're nearly halfway through the final season, and today's topic is the science and art of OKRs. And we have a very special guest here today, Corey Morrow. Corey, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a minute. Okay, so just hang tight a little bit, and let me just run through the agenda. What are you going to be learning today? The science and art of OKRs. Well, first of all, number 1, you're going to learn key implementation risks and countermeasures for introducing goal setting to your DAO. That's the first thing. Number 2, you're going to learn how to unlock greater alignment and engagement from distributed members. And finally, you're going to learn how feedback systems can drive shared ownership of the goal setting process and support a culture of accountability, which is absolutely key. I'm going to just hand over to Corey.
Just very quickly, as you're doing that, OKRs are one of many goal-setting systems. It is a very particular goal-setting system with its own language and idiosyncrasies, and I've come to favor it because I believe it is the most flexible and most powerful in a number of different situations, whereas KPIs are better for routine performance. OKRs can also be used for that and allow for a much more innovative, non-routine goal setting as well. Peter Drucker, a famous management guru, was talking about management by objectives in the 1950s. A man named Andy Grove took what he called OKRs for the first time to Intel in the 70s. And then a man named John Doerr brought the same thing to Google. So that's basically between Intel and Google. This is how it became very standard, especially in the tech industry, but elsewhere as well. So what we're going to get into today is I said 10 tools and 2 tactics. I'm actually going to give you 8 today, and then of course you can leave your email. I'll give you an opportunity to do that at the end, and I can follow up with the additional 2, but it's kind of overkill anyways, and the point in giving so many tools is to demonstrate how various other initiatives in your organization, whatever stage it's in, are going to support your effort with OKRs. So there's sort of a support infrastructure. All right, let's see. I'm going to take a peek and see if anybody's been engaged over here. Okay, so we have some experience doing goal setting at the level of the entire organization. Nice. Seems like less on the individual level, less on the team level. I know not everybody can be in Morrow right now. And it looks like some people do have some experience with OKRs, KPIs, etc. So we'll get into this a little bit later when I introduce the 2 tactics. The 2 tactics today are, 1, an implementation roadmap. I'll explain this in a little bit. And the other is feedback systems. And feedback systems, might as well just grab a label over here. I'm calling feedback systems are absolutely crucial for goal setting to come to work for you over time. And I differentiate feedback systems from feedback because a lot of organizations, a lot of individuals, they just wing feedback. You know, maybe they watched a TED Talk once on how to give good feedback or how to receive good feedback. And if I were to ask you, could you summarize those points for me? How do you give good feedback? How do you help people receive feedback? You might be able to pull 1 or 2 things up in your memory, and hopefully everybody just sort of hopes you're using some of these insights in your organization and doing it well enough. But first I want to, before we get to the systems, I want to talk about the general structure. So OKRs, or goal setting, could exist at three different levels, right? We talked over here about the whole organization, key teams and domains, and key individuals. So it's not that every individual has to be doing goal setting, or every team needs to be doing goal setting, but the ones that are important at the moment. And then later, if you had others that came online, you would have already had some good momentum, so you could add those. So I'm going to take these three, and we'll look at these three levels in the context of rolling out a OKR initiative within your organization. Now, maybe you don't expect to do it at all of these levels. That's okay. But I'm going to highlight a reason that you might plan on expanding your horizon, expanding your scope to a much bigger frame of reference, which would be taking 18 months or so to roll this out. The reason being, if we think of these as the three levels, then you might start at the 3-month mark with level 1 after doing some prep work. So let's say whatever level 1 is going to be, let's say the whole organization. You want to come up with articulate some goals for your entire DAO. Okay, so we'll do that here. And after 3 months, you will have had some feedback. That's what exists somewhere in here. And then you'll be able to better articulate some goals the next quarter at the same level. So level 1, round 2. At the same time, you might be introducing another level at the same time. You might be introducing, okay, let's get a few key individuals to do it, or a few key teams, etc., etc. We can see that just after having 3 rounds of feedback, we could maybe expect to have the process dialed in and have clear, effective OKRs. We're talking about what exactly that means and how we would get there and what the feedback systems are to get there over time. And if you take this same logic all the way through to all 3 levels, it really does take 18 months to have all of these levels going smoothly. And what we're looking for in the end is we want quality goal setting at all levels. We want greater alignment of priorities between the different levels. And at this point, we really want things to be taking care of themselves. Whoever was sponsoring this project to begin with, or to leave, some other people have learned enough along the way to be able to continue it and take it forward. It's become sort of a part of the culture, and a lot of people understand now what it means to do effective goal setting. So this is the first tactic, is expanding your horizon with regards to, no, we're not just going to start writing goals and then maybe have somebody give me feedback once or twice and then we'll be good, we'll be in good shape. So expand your horizon a little bit, think in terms of this implementation roadmap, and expect that, with the pace of business these days, something is going to happen within there to make this rollout a little bit challenging in one way or another. Some change in leadership, some change in your circumstances, something. And let's see, I think I might come back to this a little bit later, but risks to success, you might wish to also at the beginning think about delaying the layer of the team or domain level OKRs. If you're expecting big changes, multiple new members, change in scope of work, any sort of reorganization, that might be the harder place to find success, is at the domain or team level. And secondly, starting with that, sometimes there's a desire to get into goal setting because there's a sense that somebody needs it, or somewhere in the organization needs it kind of badly. There's a lack of accountability, right? So people want to use goals to drive accountability. And that, of course, makes sense. It's understandable. But starting with those who need it the most may not be your best strategic move in the long run, compared to starting with those who can set a very high standard and a positive example for others to see what some effective OKRs might look like. So now I've basically not described anything. I know some people have some experience with what the definition of an OKR is, but I don't want to assume that. So OKR, objective and key results, again, it's a particular type of goal setting, and it means a particular thing. I'm going to go to one of my documents here, which can be used as a tool, and use this definition. So an objective here is a meaningful, audacious, or inspiring result for the company that you, whoever you is, an individual or a team, are largely responsible for. Whereas a key result is considerably more discrete. A key result would be a specific, falsifiable, that means like it must be able to be verified at the end, not like not wishy-washy words, and time-bound accomplishment, which is aggressive yet realistic and demonstrates important progress towards one of the objectives. So key results are nested under objectives. And I put this in as well, the idea of a task, because a task is separate from a key result because it's really something you could do in single session, basically. So if you're putting tasks in as key results, which it's true that a task could be a specific and falsifiable and time-bound, but if it's like send 10 emails with a template, you could do that within a few minutes or 10 minutes or however long it's going to take you, right? So that wouldn't necessarily qualify as a key result. It just might not be ambitious enough. So there's sort of like a lower and higher threshold for this. The time frame in which this is usually used is a quarterly, which is why we were looking at every 3 months here. It can be different. You don't have to use a quarterly time frame, but unless you have some specific reason to consider otherwise, that would be what I would recommend. Okay, so here's the first template which I'm offering here. It's just a simple OKR template, and many of these link to the other templates, so you'll see that happening a lot. And it's something that you can use. With all of these, you can put your own logo here. None of them are branded for me, so you can just take them and run with them. The things that you are going to want to change are going to be obviously the logo, anything highlighted, and you're going to see a number of references to things like a repository, other links here. This might take some time for you to explore, and I won't have time to click through every single link in every single document, but you'll see how you can use a suite of tools rather than say this tool in isolation of an OKR template to better support this mission of rolling out goals. Here on the second page, there's a basic reminder covers aiming high on the first draft and shooting for at least one aspirational objective and one exploratory objective. And those are described down here. I'll get into an example of these shortly. And it also encourages you to consider this third template here, which I'm including, of the OKR review process. We'll get into that after we get into the second template, which is going to be the concept of shared language. So maybe some of you have experienced the difficulty in rolling out a new system without some shared language. Maybe some of you can think of some stories, whether in a more traditional organization or in a DAO, of without having some shared meaning, yes, around the definitions here of what is an OKR, and a framework for it. Without having some shared deeper language, it can be hard to get the results you want to get as a group or from key individuals. So let's take a look at this second document here, which is key terms and expectations for domain owners. I use the language domain owners. It's kind of like a department head or something like that if you think of a traditional organization, but domains and subdomains, if you have some other experience, I think probably Etienne has taken you through, you've all gone through the first two seasons, and so you might have some experience already with what Aaron Dignan calls domains. Is that right, Etienne?
Yeah, exactly. So we have been through it, but I would say, it's probably more akin to something like a working group or a work stream, which is the more sort of common terms in a DAO, but also pods. They're called pods very often, and also sub-DAOs. So sub-DAOs within the overall DAO. So it really depends on the structure of the DAO, but that's very much what domains would be akin to.
Excellent, great. Well, there's some intuitive understanding of it, and we can get into more detail later.
So a quick question on that. Sorry, can I just jump in?
Yeah, please.
Just on that breakdown there, because I think one of the challenges we have with OKRs is a lot of people working on individual targets rather than in a team. Would you because obviously it's quite decentralized and everyone's sort of got their own work stream. Do you find that you should roll that up at the company level, or almost have a kind of, I don't know, individual sub team or something like that? How would you help set objectives at the individual level?
So I think it's this is where the art comes in, right? I'm providing a lot of tools, a lot of structure, and it's up to each of the leaders that are going to be sponsoring, running a rollout of goal setting to decide really where is going to be the place that we can win fast, and set a good example. Usually it's a place where there's some level of urgency and some level of capability. To start again with a place where accountability is challenging would not be my recommendation of the number one place to start, even though it's tempting. And whether in your particular case, the place where you can find wins and clarity and some success is at the organization level, or with some key individuals, or with the team. I think the team is often the hardest. The working group is often the hardest. That's my opinion, but that would just be sort of teasing that out. If you have questions or want to get into more detail on that, feel free to contact me. And we have one more question at this point I'll take, and then I'll move back into it. Yeah, go ahead, Think Decade.
Yeah, I have a quick question, and that question is, this all seems like really, really, uh, like it's a lot, right? Is there like a minimum viable OKR for teams to set in order to begin execution? For example, right now I've launched a new project that there's a lot going on in the planning phase, but I feel like there is a need to execute or start performing. So I'm curious, right? Like, is there a minimum viable OKR that teams can set and then start executing? And as they progress, they add to some of these things.
Yeah, cool. I've never heard the term minimum viable OKR, but I love it. And I would say, yeah, start with any individual, start with yourself. There's no need to make a big announcement, right? There's no need to get other people involved. That would be the lowest profile, lowest commitment. I would just say start with the previous template that we were looking at and take a look at a couple of these other ones, and you'll have a good idea for yourself on how you can hold yourself accountable. Or maybe pick one. Best thing you could do, again, to use these feedback systems, and it's still like minimum viable, but you're taking the initiative of not just living in the bubble of your own mind, but stress testing the quality of your goal setting with somebody else that can be trusted. So, yeah, on that note, I'm going to get back into some of these additional tools and part of the feedback systems. So here we have a document called Terms and Expectations for Leaders. This is, like all of them, optional. It's not minimum viable, but it's going deeper so that you can start to think about having some shared language. And here is going to be a very illustrative example of how we can hold ourselves to the highest standards of really, really clear goal setting, taking all of this into account, of the idea that objectives and results can be committed, like hard and fast goals that you're committed to hit, aspirational, which is like, it would be nice and I'm going to try my best, or exploratory, like we're really in uncharted waters here, but I think it's worth, taking some gambles and seeing what happens if we go over here and do this. Sometimes those are very important goals too. We also have OKRs at the level of inputs, where you're describing what is completely within your control, answering the questions, what actions can I take? It's very much related to known responsibility that can be managed. The outputs would be the effects. This can be important because it relates to measurability. So if something's going to take time, you might want to be monitoring it, and you might want to be looking at the outputs. Finally, there's the outcomes, which is the ultimate impact of the outputs, and that's answering the question, what is true as a result of our success, however you're defining success, whatever the objective is. So, take an example. Let's look at a political organization, a local political party. Let's say, whatever, in the United States, could be Democratic, Republican, whatever you like. And this is hypothetical for Q4 of 2024, or the quarter preceding. They might stagger it, not look at Q4, but the 3 months preceding the election. So they might say, we want to get our candidate reelected. That is a outcome type objective, which you can see in my comments here. Because outcomes are not completely controllable, this objective is aspirational, so coded in blue. It is not committed. It's not something that you can commit to. You don't know if you can control that. Now, let's say in order to get the candidate reelected, in order to get the candidate reelected, let's try and get 20,000 people to commit to voting for her. That's, again, 20,000. Not sure if we can get that, but from previous experience, let's say this organization does know that they can knock on at least 10,000 doors. They have the volunteers to do that. It's a committed key result. This is an input type key result because the organization has determined that knocking on 10,000 doors, it's well within their capability, and so it's also committed. Now let's look at an output. This is neither outcome nor input. This is kind of the middle layer. An output type key result measures the effects of an input. So let's say knock on 2,500 doors per week, starting from X date. And this is aspirational because we don't know for sure if we can hit that, because it's a little bit faster than we've tried in the past. So you can see how there's inputs, outputs, outcomes. It's a type of logic that you force yourself into in order to articulate really high fidelity goals that can keep you very organized, which can be very useful on a personal level, but can be also extremely useful on an organizational level to describe not just what you want, but how you plan to get there. And we have a question. I don't get why KR3 is not also an input. Are we talking about KR3 for objective 1 here, knock on 2,500 doors? This, this I'm defining as an output because it's the definition of input here would be what is within our control. I would therefore tend to associate inputs exclusively with committed goals that you know you can manage. And if you don't know you can manage it and it's aspirational, like this would be your metric for success starting on week 1 to see, okay, let's say we hit 2,000. Knowing what you do, having the data on what you do, that is input. So if I rewrote this and said something like monitor our progress on a weekly basis, that could be an input key result. But because we're specifically looking for a number related to that, I would call that an output that is giving us a temperature read on how quickly we're going to hit our target. I hope that helps. So here we have a very clear example spelled out for people. This can be used to get a couple individuals to start it together on an individual level and maybe give each other feedback. It could be used for a working group, or it could be used to help people understand the goals of the organization. Let's go back to Morrow for a second. And I just want to frame the relationship of these. So we're talking about feedback systems, and here we just looked at key terms and expectations. This is a part of one layer of support infrastructure, which is helping whatever layer you're going to work with first, individuals, the entire organization, and or teams to use this template for setting the OKRs. Another extremely important one, there's 2 more here, and then it gets a little bit more abstract and supportive down here. But these 2, which I want to go into a bit more detail with in the next 10 minutes, are, and sorry, Mia, I'll come back to your question at the end if that's all right. Let's go here. This is the idea of a review process. So we're talking about feedback systems. systems means repeatable, reliable, not improvised. So this is a recommended process for reviewing OKRs for feedback. There is a simple version and an advanced or critical version. The simple version here is just going to give a few points to consider for the reviewer. And taking in the whole document first, trying to really understand how the person who wrote the document is thinking, get the whole context in your head before you start offering criticism and responding like sentence by sentence. There's just kind of a few points here which are relatively explainable. So this is the simple version of the feedback process. The reviewer thinks about these things, and then they have a question, they have a discussion and provide some questions to the person who wrote the OKRs. A more advanced version, which some people feel uncomfortable with, but if you're daring, can be extremely educational, extremely valuable, provides exactly the type of constructive conflict that can be helpful among leaders in an organizations. Instead of simply reviewing the questions above, you're going to get quantitative with your feedback and use a key to indicate exactly what you mean with your numbers, because numbers could also be subjective. You know, my 8 out of 10 compared to your 8 out of 10 without finding a shared language about what that means is not particularly helpful. So this introduces us to yet another tool here, another layer of the feedback systems, which is something that you can use outside of OKRs, something that you can use outside of a formal feedback process or a evaluation where somebody's performance is on the line. And this is really important to stress, I think, because in DAOs in particular, there's a lot of aspiration towards self-management, which is beautiful. I've been interested in this for the longest time. And a lot of times structurally, you have people that are offering your organization their time and their effort on their own good faith. So it's not like they're getting a lot of rewards, at least not immediately. Giving quantitative feedback with a shared language specifically outside of the context of punishment or reward, but just in the context of feedback, and here's what I mean, is extremely powerful to align members within an organization. So here is, again, these are all templates, these are all editable. This is an example of how you might consider quantifying performance. So maybe an 8 out of 10 means this gets the job done well. Maybe a 7 out of 10 means, yeah, this gets the job done. There is something to be desired. And 10 out of 10 is reserved for like truly masterful. The idea here is that you're trying to shy away from giving the best marks, because very rarely do we really mean that somebody had no room to improve. Mastery and greatness in any area are rare by definition. It's very normal to have people in senior roles in major organizations that are just hitting some parts of their jobs at an 8 or a 7 according to this scale. So if you can destigmatize that effectively and use quantitative feedback in an informal environment, you can end up having really rich conversations about what the desired standards are, what you think is possible based on somebody else's or your own capability. Again, the highlighted yellow areas are editable or recommended to edit regardless. Everything is editable. And Let's see. I'm back here. Now we've covered 4 of the major tools here. We have the OKR template itself, the key terms and expectations for domain owners, the review process, which there are 2 different versions of, and the feedback and evaluation key, which again is not necessarily just formal feedback. There are some other documents which I don't have time to go into now in order to leave time for questions and discussion. Here we have a role design template, which has 7 key questions to increase role clarity. And there's some additional links that you can follow. And finally, we have what I call a domain map template, where, again, the idea is you can make this your own, but here's just imagine a fictional organization. You've got some subdomains within the administrative domains, like who handles monthly reporting from a financial perspective, and who is ultimately in charge of how that gets done, who's in charge of doing it itself, who's consulted, and who's informed. And you've got some different decision-making methods here. DAOs lean towards inclusivity, they lean towards self-management. There's some ethics and ideologies kind of coming along for the ride, or very explicitly there at the forefront. There's often a desire to involve people in decisions, and this can be beautiful, but it can also be probably, as you've experienced, kind of taxing. Sometimes people involve others in conversations or decision-making processes that maybe they don't feel they really want to be involved in. And I would love to hear if people have some challenges with that, with regards to like how could that show up in goal setting. So I have some recommended definitions here regarding what are these different types of decision making: autonomous, advice, consent, consensus, and voting. And they use this tool called the Gradients of Agreement that was developed by Sam Kainer, brilliant mind. Useful in, again, using numerical feedback to indicate exactly what you mean by your level of support. So then you take ideas like this, or you take a quantitative scale like this, and you integrate it into your decision-making frameworks and deciding how to decide, and you can come to, for example, definition of consensus here being everybody must be a 4 or higher in terms of the gradients of agreement. When I say higher, I mean 4 towards a 1. So they're at least abstaining or supporting with reservations or agreeing with a minor point of contention, or they fully like it. So the domain map did I ever effectively share this or no? I kind of lost track of. That came across once at least. Okay, great. The domain map is intended. There's a guide on how you might start rolling out here in this domain map implementation guide, but it's intended for you to articulate however it makes sense in your organization. What are the major domains? What are the subdomains? How does decision making happen within those domains? Who is ultimately accountable, responsible, consultative form, and informed? And having this supports, as you can imagine, role clarity. Having role clarity supports, as you can imagine, setting effective goals. So there's like layers and layers of support here, which could be all considered part of your feedback systems. And as we go back up here and imagine starting anywhere, whether you want to start at the whole organization, specific key domains, or key individuals, it's really this feedback process where you move from here to here that you get all the gold in improving the quality of your goal setting. And because stab at it, it can be harder than you think to write effective goals, especially in a very structured framework such as this, but it can be very rewarding. And I know that's a lot to take in, so I'm going to pause now and just open it up to everyone on anything. We have 2 tactics to summarize. We have the implementation roadmap and the feedback systems. You can find all the tools on this Miro board here. And yeah, let's get to Mia first, because our deliverables not included in this process, as in what do we need to provide to make this happen? New website, landing page, whatever else. Mia, I think that though that level of detail can be included. So if you take the example of a website, for some organizations, a website is going to be a relatively simple process. And for other organizations, it's going to involve like a rebrand or editing some software in a web app, and there might be just more decisions to make. There might be more actual work to do. The deliverables should be at least hinted at some point or another in the key results. So if the website was the goal and this were a big project, and if the website was the objective, then you could have the 3 to 5 major deliverables articulated as key results, and those would be outputs.
Okay. And would you measure those on a binary basis, so sort of like either complete or not, or would you like kind of scale it as like a kind of target?
Yeah, well, I guess like many things, it depends. If it's really go or no go and the deadline matters entirely and is completely consequential to your organization, then maybe it's binary. In a situation where you don't have a big payroll, you don't have a big burn rate, you've got a small agile organization and you're trying to hit a target, get the website up by 3 months from now. If you end up getting it up a week late, is there really value in making that binary? I would say it's probably more like you should give yourself a 90% marks or whatever on that objective. And Think Decade, there are links to all the docs in multiple ways here. So we'll make sure that you have the link to the Google Drive folder posted conspicuously in this channel and elsewhere. Why don't I just do that now? Copy link. There you go. You can also find it on Morrow. Dewey, how many people do you need to review the OKRs as part of the review process? The whole organization? No, it's as many as makes sense. Go as light as you can. In the spirit of that minimum viable OKR question earlier, start light, and don't make this a exhausting administrative burden. The idea is like commit to it over a longer period of time and get better at it rather than try and sprint and become the best immediately. Take your time with this, get multiple rounds of feedback, perhaps from multiple people. If you have some curiosity, you can hit me up, you can DM me. I'm happy to chat a little bit. And any other questions?
Is there a way of just enabling multiple people to contribute to ideas, to objectives, and then rate which ones are most important? Because I think sometimes we feel this exercise can be quite top down. It would be the leaders set the objectives and then people review them. But ideally, in a DAO, you want it to come from the wider team. So, any tips around that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful. I mean, that's why one of the other tools here is this training design template, because here this is about within the first 3 months before you really get going, identifying who could really benefit from some training. I mean, we just had a crash course on what OKRs are, but taking some time to practice writing them and giving each other feedback, whether it's just a session or two with a few people, can really go a long way. So getting clear on who would benefit and, how to come up with a basic lesson plan, etc. That can be valuable before deciding, or as a way of deciding who to involve. And then it is one of the beautiful things is that OKRs can be, they lend themselves to bottom-up thinking. So you can have a session which is more, maybe your goals for that session are not to write OKRs yet. Maybe those people that are participating in this ideation never write the OKRs, or maybe they do. But they can participate in ideation for other people to write it, or they can participate in ideation as a first step, and then in some more convergent thinking towards actually writing and articulating this, especially as a group. You can see how you would run into a lot of problems if you have people in a DAO writing their own OKRs at an individual level. And it's cool that they're informing people with what they want to do, but if it's out of line with the goals of the organization, and it's not great. They've just codified and committed to a bad plan, and so they need feedback. They need help. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole there. I apologize for that. And again, feel free to message me if you have further questions.
Corey, I'm just going to jump in here because I'm mindful of the fact that we sort of have 1 minute to go before the hour is up. And some of our friends, especially over in the States, are likely to have back-to-back meetings. So yes. I do just want to just wrap it up. And just again, thank you very much before I take some more questions so that those who need to drop off can drop off. And anyone who wants to stay, Corey, would it be okay if we spend another 5 or 10 minutes just on questions? Because I've got some of my own.
I'm available. So anybody that wants to stick around for more detailed discussion, please hang around and we'll take another 5 to 10. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Everybody else needs to head on their way.
Okay, that's great. Well, I know Kyle, thank you for being here. Jim and Mark and all of those guys, if you need to shoot off, please, remember that these links are available to all of you, all of those tools. Corey is just giving them away for free to all of you. So please do come back or save these links so that you can reuse and implement them. So anyone who needs to drop off, we're on the hour. Thank you very much for being here. And for anyone else who would like to stay a little bit longer and who do have some more questions, please stick with us. So first of all, I'm going to open up the floor to everyone else here. Think Decade, you're typing, you're probably staying a little bit longer. Do you want to just take yourself off mute and ask your question straight out?
No, just saying a big thank you to Corey. Such an insightful session. I have to drop. I have a meeting
do?
Top of the hour.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you, Etienne.
Yeah.
I would be going through the link and just to digest it and see how that can help with Public Good Africa. So I think this has been like a very, very good insight at the right time for me. So
Okay.
that's really awesome.
That's great to hear. It really was, as Corey said, a crash course in OKRs. If you've never done them before, I can imagine that it's slightly overwhelming. At Colony, we have been setting OKRs for years now. Every quarter, we set and we grade OKRs, and that is what we use to set our goals and track progress and hold ourselves accountable. So I absolutely love them. I think it's a great way of doing things, planning, organizing, and tracking goals. Again, I just want to open up the floor to anyone else here. Micha, you said you need to go. Okay, he's learned a lot. Micha, if you need to go, that's fine, not a problem. Mark is typing at the moment. Mark, again, if you need to drop off, that's totally fine. Oh, there we go. To do it properly. Okay. Corey, do you want to read this out? Because it seems like a question.
Yeah. To do it properly, administrative burden looks a bit heavy. From a DAO perspective, many contributors are just jumping in for a few hours a week that they have to spare. Who administers this in other organizations? Yeah, what a great question. So I would give a little caveat, which is to say it's not all or nothing, right? Like we've talked about the idea of, at the beginning, identifying where you can have some early wins. The leanest, meanest way to start would be at an individual level. You yourself could set your own goals, find one buddy who can give you some feedback with these systems. You tinker it around a little bit, you just start working the muscle, and then it might start to come to you immediately like, all right, if we wanted to expand this out to deal with the team or for the whole org, what would this process look like? Who would the sponsor be? In the operational, organization with existing revenue or that is well funded, you might have somebody championing this cause that could be related to administration, somebody that has these skills. It could be an HR director, HR business partner. It could be it could signal a lot of support if you had a sponsor at the executive level. And I think if you're going to be making challenging asks of volunteers, it would be very important to have somebody senior in the organization hold a session and sponsor it themselves and say, listen, everybody, this is the direction we're thinking on going. Here's our sort of pilot project. It's going to take some time, but I think, probably you could honestly say we've heard from many of you anyways that it can be challenging to work distributed and to get the type of feedback that is meaningful. So we see this as an opportunity to give you more involvement and engagement in the work with your peers or with the domain owner or whatever, what have you. And I think people really crave that feedback. So I think it's just about starting with a place that it can get some easy wins and going from there.
Cool. Thank you, Mark. Great question, and Corey as well. Okay, anyone else, guys? We've got about Corey. If you're willing to stay another 5 minutes, then I am going to keep the floor open to anyone else for a few more questions. Please just take.
Maybe specifically like related to a DAO and related to, because so much of this is about feedback systems. I'd love to hear from any of you if you think that people are craving feedback. Are they looking for more ways to connect on a higher fidelity manner about the work that's being done? Because in my view, volunteers don't volunteer unless they're half-hearted. And people that are part of DAOs are often quite connected to the mission. So there's an emotional engagement to the work already. Can that be a tool to use a more high fidelity system like this? And would it be of value, or what do you think might not work well? Like, let's get into the details of that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, Mark is just typing there, and I don't think he's able to speak. Oh, there we go. Roles are often unclear and ambiguous, so not always clear who should even provide the feedback. What a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why I think of it in terms of layers of a support infrastructure of the feedback system, because that's more at the root what you're talking about. Role clarity is definitely an issue in terms of being able to even write OKRs. You know, again, this is why you can start with people that have a lot of responsibility. You can start with leaders. You can start with yourself. Like, start there. But then if you're thinking about at a broader base, I would say, well, maybe it's not the right place to, you know, it might be contraindicated. It might be that you don't want to try and push OKRs down everywhere in the organization. Could just be key individuals. But if you did have reason to think like, it'd be great if we could get so-and-so or this team or that or this doing this as well, then think in terms of that support infrastructure where how can we clarify how we want to structure domains and decision making in this DAO, because it's not just about like, you know, inclusivity or like, yeah, this is not you know, DAOs are not the same as like organizations that want to blur all the lines of hierarchy. Sometimes like hierarchy, when articulated clearly through the use of a domain map, can be extremely helpful to say, this is where and this is how people are going to make decisions about these matters. And people really actually crave that structure and that clarity and say like, oh, okay, or I'm invited to participate, but I don't have to. So.
Good. Thanks, Corey. Guys, any other questions from Tom, Jeremy, Mughal? We've got a few people staying behind here, which is great to see. I personally have a question. If you guys wouldn't mind, I'll take this to the stage here. So, Corey, I was thinking about, again, at Colony, we have been doing OKRs for a very long time. It took me a while to sort of just get the hang of it and set proper KRs. And you were mentioning sort of input KRs and outputs and outcomes and the tensions between them. And I was wondering whether, you know, setting like an outcome key result, like wanting to get at least 10,000 videos on every YouTube video we post, that's sort of out of your control, right? So is that a good KR, or should we rather say, well, forget about the views, let's just make sure we post 10 videos every month, and that is something that we can control? So again, is it good having things that are a little bit more sort of outcome based and aspirational, or should we sort of focus more on things that we can control?
Awesome question, Because I think after a couple sessions of doing this, you might start to realize your bias as an individual, or maybe as a senior leadership team. That, we really like inputs, or we really like outcomes.
Right.
But no one is better than the other, really. It's about. I think if you're lacking outcomes entirely, you might be a bit hazy on where you're going.
Okay.
You know that you're going to be doing
Gotcha.
some work and that you can do it, but you might be missing some opportunity for some ambition there with regards to zooming out far enough, getting the bird's eye view to see what do we think is possible, even if we're just articulating it in a aspirational sense, right?
Yeah.
Like it's my personal opinion is that a mix of committed, aspirational, and exploratory, and a mix of inputs, outputs, and outcomes are going to help you see. I mean, inputs, outputs, and outcomes kind of help you think at the macro, meso, and micro level. And I think that's very helpful whenever you're doing quarterly goal setting, because it all comes together in greater clarity when you're thinking about your goals at all of those levels. And then the committed, aspirational, exploratory is about using each goal setting opportunity to expand your horizons and not just look at the obvious, like must be done. If we don't at least once a quarter take the opportunity to look at what could be done and how could we do things differently, instead of like what are the burning platforms, what fires do I have to put out, like what urgent goals do we have. Like OKRs are not just meant to be like a glorified to-do list. If you're also thinking in terms of committed, aspirational, and exploratory, then you're doing yourself and everybody else in the organization the best service in kind of finding your edge, like your personal edge, that you're not meant to hit it. Like that's not the point. You're finding the edge, you're finding the horizon, and you're moving towards it and growing. That's what I would say.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I love that. So if we say, bye Mark, got a drop, thanks for your time and resource score. We'll be mulling over. Fantastic. Yeah, please remember to save these links that Corey shared and go through them again in your own time. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Just one more question from myself then, Corey, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Once you've set your OKRs for the quarter, are they in any way flexible in the sense that, let's say something happens where we're completely thrown off and we know that we have no chance of hitting that KR because of some big event. Do we, after a few weeks or halfway through the quarter, set new KRs because of this event, or do we sort of just keep with what we've got and we just take that into consideration at the grading stage? Are they flexible throughout the quarter?
I say it's both and, like at the quote unquote grading stage or evaluation or feedback, like that context is going to come into the situation. You're not going to be providing feedback and evaluation without that context.
Sure.
It is absolutely clear.
Yeah.
So I like to just keep all the records of the. It could be an important learning experience when you're taking that half hour at the end of the quarter, getting some feedback and reviewing with whoever, to think like, wow, we actually thought we were going to be able to do this. Like in retrospect, with what we learned, we shouldn't have thought that, or whatever. It really just depends on the situation. But instead of overwriting, just add, and so like put the date on it and be like, okay, add it up this date and kind of indicate a pivot.
Okay. So you don't open a new slate every time something goes wrong. You sort of just keep that context and
because I think that could be it kind of sends a strange message where you're like, then these things are actually rather fungible, aren't they? But like, and they can be and will be when they have to be, but you don't necessarily want to like normalize that by way of just let's redo this. Just if probably maybe an entire objective is crashes and burns, but like, are all of your objectives going to crash and burn in the same corner? Like maybe some of them are still intact.
Perfect. Get it. Right. Well, here we go. Jeremy, I wrote a few OKRs for a paid role definition in a sub-DAO that he's leading. If some of you would like to open it and provide some feedback, that would be love it. Okay, yeah. So again, Corey, I don't know if you would mind just having a quick look and giving Jeremy some feedback on that. That would be appreciated.
Yeah, Jeremy, let me get back. I've opened the link, and I will. I'm just making sure it is loading properly. Yeah. Okay. Now, these objectives and key results, this is a new position. So you see this as like, just to understand, this is something that you would want to kind of equate to a 90-day plan, top down, for this new role. Is that fair to say? Like, you're saying, look, we're very clear on what this person needs to come in and do. We want you to have a clear understanding of what success looks like within the first 90 days. I'm not going to be asking you to write your own 90-day plan.
Yeah, exactly. It was written with a potential candidate for this role. And the paid role is like an experiment within the sub-DAO to justify the necessity of this role. So that's why I thought it was a necessity to include like clear OKR in the role definition.
Yeah, see, it's not necessarily wrong to be top down when you need to be top down. It can just work both ways. Yeah, I'll review it, and I'll send you a message. If you could do me a favor and put this into a format where I can make comments directly in the document, like that would be excellent. And you can
I'll send you an invite link so you will be able to put comment in. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeremy. Right, Corey. Well, listen, we've got some diehard OKR fans hanging around still, but I think we're going to wrap it up there, Corey. Thank you very, very much. I know it was a lot to get through. I wish we had another hour to really dig into this, but we don't. So I just want to thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it for all of the tools that you're sharing as well with everyone. So I hope we can have you back in the future again on the same topic or something else, because you're obviously a man of many talents, and we'd love to have you back.
Thank you so much, Etienne. It's a pleasure to present for all of you, and I wish you all the best, and feel free to be in touch.
Fantastic. Appreciate it.
Cheers.